In case you're unaware, I'm somewhat of a Lord of the Rings fan. It's true. But this isn't Lord of the Rings, this is The Hobbit, the Desolation of Smaug. Smaug. The Desolation of Benediction Cumberwumber. So I am a fan of Tolkien's The Hobbit, but don't worry, I'm not gonna sit up here and just dissect all the differences and all that rubbish. But I am just laying that fact out there. Like a little bird, I release it. A lot of people were mixed on the first Hobbit movie. I loved the poop out of it. I just thought they wonderfully captured the spirit of adventure and fun that I loved from the book. And I actually didn't think it was really that padded. I mean, there is clearly stuff that is making the films longer, but I didn't think in the first one it was that big of a problem. They're using the Hobbit book as more of a template and adding these extra elements from other Tolkien writings and making it more of this action-adventure epic, which, for better or worse, is what we have. Well, I thought it worked really well in the first movie. In this one, things are starting to wear a tiny bit thin, just a tiny bit. The strings are starting to show. Puppet metaphor. When we last left our heroes, Bilbo, Gandalf, and the dwarves have just escaped from the Goblin Mountain and they're on the run. So they haul up with this guy Bjorn who can turn into a bear. It sort of feels like this scene was in there just for the fans, and I do appreciate it on some level, but it's kind of fan service. Then Gandalf has to leave them to go and check on some dangers that might be brewing elsewhere. Because we need a third movie, so we need to set that stuff up pretty quickly. So then the dwarves and Bilbo make their way into Mirkwood, which is essentially a dangerous, evil, scary forest with giant spiders. And this kind of stuff is where the series really excels, with all the action sequences and seeing Bilbo kick spider butt. He's clearly grown on this journey. He's not just the poor, scared character who needs to be rescued. If anything, the dwarves are the ones always getting into crap. Orlando Bloom returns as Legolas, the elf who can kill 80 people with a teaspoon in under 5 minutes. He's a cool character, and while he's not that essential to the overall plot, it was nice to have him back. And then we have a completely new character, a female elf named Toriel. You know, I recognize that there weren't hardly any female characters in Tolkien's books, so if they want to invent a really cool female character for the story, that's great. But the problem here is that, and it's probably my biggest problem in the entire movie, she is completely invented so that she can form a romantic relationship with the sexy dwarf, Keely, and now we have a romantic subplot for our trilogy. Because we really needed that. And it wouldn't be so bad if the writers put any effort into it. They don't. They literally meet. We hardly know anything about her character. We don't really know Keely because in the last movie he was just another dwarf. And now they're supposed to have some romantic relationship and we're supposed to care? No! I mean, there's a scene where she is healing a wound on his leg and he is looking up at her, and it is essentially the Lord of the Rings equivalent of... But then finally we get to the heart of what the real story is about. A giant freaking dragon. There's already been a whole film building up to Smaug, the dragon that guards the dwarves' gold. And then finally, towards the end of the film, we get to see Smaug, who's voiced by Benedict Cumberwumbers. The scenes where Bilbo is sneaking into the dragon's lair are riddled with so much tension, I was squirming in my seat. Bilbo, don't go in there, it's a big dragon! And the entire sequence where Bilbo first meets Smaug is hands down the best in the movie. It's terrifying, and yet you're still filled with all this intrigue and awe at just how big this dragon is. And Cumberbatch is great as Smaug. He has the wit, and he's just so good at being evil. Whereas the first Hobbit movie felt like more of a journey type film, this one had a lot more plot and just a plethora of characters. And I think for some people that's gonna be a bonus, and I think for other people it's gonna feel a bit exhausting by the end of it. I mean, I was kind of digging just the journey story. And by the end of this movie, you feel like you're juggling 100 different characters and a dozen different plot threads. The climax of the film also feels like it leaves the audience dangling just a tad too much. There's no doubt that The Hobbit is a theatrical experience. It deserves to be seen in the cinema. Especially for the stuff involving Smaug and all the different action set pieces. It's really incredible to watch. However, I think fans of the source material and those who like to dig into character a little bit more are probably going to find this the weakest of the series. I think The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug is a B+. It's still a thrilling experience despite some of my problems with it. And only a year away until we get another 3-hour Hobbit movie where I guess the last hour will be Bilbo deciding if he wants to stop at Disneyland on the way home. Okay, from here on out I'm going to talk about a major spoiler for the film, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, turn this video off right now. Gone. So the ending of this movie might really piss people off. I went to the midnight showing of this, so I'm watching Smaug. He breaks out of the mountain, he's covered in gold, and he's like, I'm headed to the village to kill all the people. And then I noticed the lights in the movie theater are slowly starting to come up. And of course I'm ADD, I'm distracted, I'm like, what's going on? And then all of a sudden, before I knew what had happened, is it? What? Now, I don't think that that was a bad place to end the movie at all. But it is a very risky thing to do. I mean, it's a huge cliffhanger. It's the kind of cliffhanger you expect to see to be continued next week. Not to be continued next year. One funny thing is that it's kind of a cliche in theater to end your second act with either, she's pregnant, or, what have I done? And they literally do that. Now, I wasn't offended by the ending at all. It's just the way that it suddenly cut off. I think it's more of an editing issue than anything. And I know it's gonna piss people off because of all of the very rude things that some people were in the theater were shouting at the screen. So what did you guys think? Hate it? Love it? Numb? Oh, and by the way, I'm pregnant. What have I done?